Oh man, it's time for another episode of No Label Live, the show all about labels and how they can be your biggest adversity or your biggest advantage. The choice is yours. Each week, we bring on inspiring guests to share their story about how labels have impacted their life and the work that they do. So let's strap in and join this conversation. So, guys, I'm here with my friend Robert, and man, let me tell you, I heard part of his story 1 week ago, and it was amazing. We just started, and where we ended up, I don't think anybody expected that to happen during um, our conversation. And that is why I wanted to give Robert the opportunity to share his story, because you guys know I'm all about taking a label and turning that adversity into your advantage. So, Robert, thanks so much for coming on and having
Yeah,
this
man.
conversation.
Yeah.
So I think my very first question uh, that I touched on was labels, right? I think at some point in life, we all get labeled, and it helps us to kind of navigate our world. So my question to you is, what's the first time you remember getting labeled, and how did that impact your life?
Um, when I think about that, thinking about no label defines me. I think about some of my past when started getting a little bit of trouble, got incarcerated, got a few tattoos while I was incarcerated, and since then, I've been on this walk with Christ and trying to change. But anytime I feel like somebody sees those tattoos, I'm labeled, right off the bat. So um, that's a regret that I have of getting those tattoos, but it's also a part of my story of where I once was and how far I've come. Because that old me is dying away every day, and the new me is living. I am a new creation. Glory to God for what He's done for me in my life. And yeah, when I think about that being labeled, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is who I once was, and literally having a label on me permanently. But that's not who I am. But yeah.
Isn't that the beautiful thing about labels, though? They're like, we all go to these things and we get labels that say, "Hello, my name is," and usually when we have them, we get to write what they are. And I think that's the beautiful thing that you touched on about wanting to change, and you can rip a label off and you can create a new one. Um, what do you think it was about your early life that kind of led to some of those labels that were placed on you that are now giving you a platform to speak about how to change?
Um, I think it goes back to my childhood and growing up, and mostly a fatherless home. I grew up in a poverty-stricken neighborhood. We weren't, you know, totally poor, but it was tough times coming up. But there was a lot of the young boys I ran around with that didn't have fathers,
Mm.
and without that guidance, without any direction, you know, it's hard to know how to be something that you're becoming, which is a man, when you don't have that man there kind of guiding you in that direction.
Yeah.
And I used to blame everything on my dad when he was absent. Whenever I got in trouble or something went wrong, I said, if only he had been there, if only he had been there. But as I've grown and matured, I understand that getting older and being an adult has a lot of battles of its own. So I can I have a better understanding of what he was going through, and some people don't quite um, defeat those demons as they should, or whatever. But I'm working on it. I'm working on it myself. But I go back to thinking about my childhood and how I come up and the environment it was. I feel like I became a product of my environment, but and that led me down a road that eventually I felt labeled,
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm trying to shed that and become who I know that I've always I'm always I've always meant to be. I'm not who I was. My past doesn't define me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I think there's something super powerful about what you just said. The one label of just what does it actually mean to be a man? And so what you said you were running around with a lot of guys who were in similar situations. What do you think it was that created that sense of community for what you were dealing with at the time? And what did it say about what it meant to be a man to you now? And how's that different today?
Well, at the time when we were all running around with one another, I mean, that's all we had. Um, like I said, we didn't have any male role model in our lives, so we didn't have any idea of what it was to be a man. We thought it was being tough. We thought it was breaking the rules. That was being a man. Getting in fist fights and being the tough guy. And going back to when I got incarcerated, I felt like that was a step into manhood. That was a rite of passage. When you do that, now you're a man. That's so far from the truth. That's yeah.
But what did it take for you to come to that realization?
Oh, rock bottom.
Okay.
Rock bottom will teach you lessons that mountaintops never will, right? I mean, it's sometimes you got to go through those painful experiences, uh, you know, to be able to understand, um, to be grateful for what you had. I know I went through that here recently when I really started making that turn and doing that 180 and finding out what being a man is all about. That's if you've got a wife and kids, those are your responsibilities. They rely on you, and you can't be doing the same things you were doing, when you were younger, and you got to swallow that pride, and you just got to man up. You know, there's one um, situation in particular that I feel like maybe somebody might need to hear. It was we spoke about it that night when I was staying at a buddy's house, staying over there for the weekend. It was a tough time in my marriage, but I was drinking and sitting in the back porch, and something just come over me, and maybe it was God putting some fear in me, and it just hit me so quick, and I looked at my phone, and it just, if that phone rings and my wife calls me and says that I need to meet her because there's an emergency with one of my kids or something, and I'm under the influence, what am I going to do in that moment? I mean, there was a fear that went through me like never before. And I've been in some pretty scary situations, but there's no fear like this. I had two options. I could either get in that vehicle and take my chances of driving over to the emergency room, possibly get pulled over, maybe hurt somebody else, hurt myself in an accident.
Mm-hmm.
If I made it there ultimately, the look of disappointment that would be on her face to see that I'm showing up, you know, you know, you know, under the influence once again, or I could not show up. My second option, and kind of tuck my tail in between my legs and not show up because I know that it's not going to be a good situation. But then what does that say about me not being there in a very urgent situation for one of my daughters? Either way, it would not have been a good. So I just kept looking at that phone like, you better not ring, please don't ring. And that's when it really hit me, like, just because I'm away for the weekend doesn't mean I can do what I want. Doesn't mean I can go off and drink because I don't have any responsibilities. You know, she's got the kids to take care of. Anything can pop up at any moment. So any parent out there um, that may be going through a situation like I was, to where I felt like I can do what I want type, you know, I ain't, you know, that's, you still have a responsibility with those kids, and anything can happen at any time. And you want to be in a sober mind and be able to be there for your kids. But that was a very scary situation for me, and it really slapped me across the face, amongst a lot of other situations. But that was one that I kind of wanted to touch on.
Yeah, I'm sure so many people listening or watching right now can relate to having that thought come across their mind as something that led to an ultimate change. And it may have just like been a slap, like you just said, to somebody who's listening, that, hey, this is something I need to look at and something I need to change. So, going back a little bit, you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned the phrase man up.
Yeah.
So, as you think about that phrase today, the Robert today, what does that mean to you?
Oh, ah, yeah, there's a lot that goes with manning up. It's a lot of sacrifice. Um, you know, you got to do things that, and I refer to it, you know, because I have a family. So working long nights, working 7 days a week if you have to, putting in 60, 70 hours to, you know, to be able to provide for your wife and your children. It means extending grace, you know, to be able to be patient and understanding, to be loving, you know, to be humble. I mean, it takes a lot to be a man. I mean, so when I look at it now, there's a lot of those words I just mentioned I didn't have. Um, Obviously, you know, you've got to grow, and that's why, you know, my goal is to change, to continue to be able to identify what I need to do, to change, to, you know, to have discussions with others like yourself, and to learn, and to be given tools, and to be able to utilize those tools, and just to continue to change it and man up. It takes a lot. It's a lot for somebody to man up, and a lot of people don't want to do it. A lot of men don't want to do it. They don't want to exactly man up because it just seems like too much at times. But it's so worth it. And it's hard, you know. It's a lot of hard days, um, but that's what man up to me is. Looking at it and thinking about it now, it's just doing all the things that I didn't ever want to do or didn't know how to do, and it's realizing them now and just doing it and getting it done.
So, dude, I love some of the things you touched on there because I don't think I've heard a lot of guys talk about uh, grace
Mm,
and love.
mm-hmm,
And it, for me, it brought up the word compassion.
mm,
Um, and it's interesting because there was just a recent survey about the idea of loneliness that just got published. And they did 10,000 people. And out of the 10,000 people, 63% of men said that they were lonely.
mm.
And I think that part of that is we don't have space to talk about when we're struggling and what problems we're facing because we've been trained to say, I've got everything, I can take care of everything.
Yeah.
So, have you ever experienced the freedom of being able to talk to somebody about a struggle and you're like, man, that was a huge weight off
Oh,
of my chest?
oh, definitely. I mean, I feel like as men, you know, in order to be the masculine macho man, you keep that. You don't express those emotions. You know, like you said, we have that pride where I got this. I don't need any help. I can do this. when that is just so much, baloney, right? It's just, and that's what I believe what causes a lot of men to feel lonely, because in deep inside they want to talk about these things, they want to vent to somebody, they want to be able to, but you know we're not supposed to, right? Or else you're not being manly. But I think the first time, I know I've had friends back when I was young, but here recently, as an adult, when life got just a little bit harder than it did when I was a kid, the first time I was able to really express a lot of things that I had been bottling up inside was when I did the men's hike with Seacoast. And I was able to open up to some of those men and be very transparent. And like you said, it was just like an 18-wheeler off of your back. It's just, I mean, and so to all the men out there, find somebody that you can confide in, somebody that you can, somebody that you're comfortable with talking about things, man. Don't, swallow that foolish pride and just reach out to somebody, man. Really, it's, I mean, it'll do a lot.
And so you went on a men's hike with a local church here, and what do
Yeah.
you think created that? I want to say safety, but what do you think created that opportunity for you to feel like this is somewhere where I can talk about what's really going on for me?
Uh, when I first night I was up there, I didn't say very much, right? I was kind of just kind of a spectator. I was just checking it out, right? But I realized that I'm not alone in this. I'm not the only one with these struggles or with these difficulties or going through these storms. You realize that there's a lot of other men that are going through what you're going through or similar situations, or even if the situations are not similar, it's still something that needs to be discussed. It's still something that's weighing heavy on their heart. It's just, and I just, and I was just so comfortable doing it. And I'm not, it just, I mean, we just created an environment up there to where we knew we were all there for a reason. We were all there, you know, to seek God, to seek His face and to meet Him on that mountain. But um, just being transparent and opening up was it wasn't easy the first night, but it became pretty easy after that.
Mm, mm. So take heed to Robert's advice there. And if you're relating to any of this at all, find somebody that you feel safe talking to. Find another guy, because I think a lot of times we don't talk guy to guy about stuff. And it's really, yeah, like you said, you're married, you could talk to your wife, you could talk to other people in your life, but it doesn't come with the same kind of, hey, this guy is like me. I see some of myself in him, and I can tell that he's got my best interest and I've got his best interest at heart. Dude, thanks so much for sharing that. I think that's going to be powerful for people to listen to. As you,
Let me touch on something real quick.
yeah,
When it comes to that, sticking with, going out and talking to somebody, don't make excuses about doing it, because
ooh,
excuses are very dangerous. Excuses are very dangerous in the mind of the excuse maker, because then you just talk yourself out of it. You convince yourself not to do it. You're just setting a limitation on yourself. And so be very careful with making an excuse on why you can't. Just do it. Excuses are very dangerous because they're valid in your mind. So don't make excuses. Go out and do it.
man, that's so powerful. I don't think I've ever heard it put in that way, that excuses are valid in the mind of the excuse maker.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm guilty.
absolutely.
I'm guilty, but I'm
Yeah,
working.
I'll raise my hand.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think we all are, right?
Yeah, and we're all doing the best we can
That's right.
with what we've got in the moment. So I want to touch on a little bit now that you're starting your work and you're starting to change your perception of what it means to be a man, to be a father, how you show up in the world. What kind of advice would you have for some young person, whether they're a teenager or they might be in their 20s? Um, what kind of advice would you have for them?
I think it all starts with changing your attitude, um, in order to change your heart. Because me growing up, um, I was just a very negative kid. You know, it's just the glass is half empty all the time, right? Um, but I believe that you got to change your attitude in order to soften up your heart, like Ezekiel 36:26 says. I will give you a new spirit, and give you a new heart. I will take your stubborn heart of stone and give you a tender heart of flesh. And that's uh, be
Mm.
open, and invite the Lord in. You know, put that guard down that you have around your heart. Just um, be positive. Try to be filled with joy. That was one thing I had to work on a lot, and I've never had felt so much peace and happiness ever in my life. And I still have my days. I'm not perfect, but I am forgiven. I'm redeemed. Um, I'm a new person, man. And you know, um, yeah, just attitude, bro. Like, to me, that's once I changed my attitude and my outlook, it changed my heart, and it just it just it just rippled, and it just I had so much energy and focus into the negative things growing up. But once I turned that and put just as much energy and focus into the right things, the positive things, my life began to change. And it was there the whole time. I had to make that turn, man. I had to make that turn. I had to do that 180. So
Oh man,
yeah.
man! You are filled with so much wisdom, man. I'm just, I'm just along for the ride here. I know that people are gonna relate to this so much. Um, so you touched on joy. I want you to dive into that a little bit. What does joy look like in your life?
uh, and I got to stick with that attitude. Once I've changed my attitude and it changed my outlook, once again, I know it sounds repetitive, but that brought me joy. I finally knew what joy was. I never knew what joy was. I didn't know what peace was. I've seen so many others, uh, what seemed to me like they were filled with joy and peace, and I'm like, what is it? What is it about them that they can be so happy no matter, even in difficult times, and I can't. I'm just, and I guess it goes back to Jesus, right? I mean, once I allowed Jesus in my heart, He took over, and I surrendered all my problems and laid my burdens at His feet and at the cross, man. And and I had faith, which was a very hard thing for me to do in the beginning, because faith is believing in something that you can't see, right? And I was always the type of guy that, well, I got to see it to believe it. Well, that's the exact opposite of faith. So that was very difficult for me to do. Um, Whenever I was going through my storms, was just to believe it to Him and have faith. Um, but once I started, getting deeper in my faith, changing my attitude, back to Ezekiel 36:26, He softened up my heart. My life became filled with joy. Not every day. Many days I struggle, and I even struggle with my faith at times. But yeah, joy to me is changing who I once was into who I am now. That brings me joy right there. Just reminding myself every once in a while you got to look back at where you come from. I know a lot of times they say move forward, don't look back. I think it's okay to look back to see how far you've come and to see. I look at, oh gosh, I look at some of the stuff I did and the situations I was in, and I'm like, I'm disappointed in myself. I'm ashamed of myself. Um, but I'm proud of myself at the same time for
Hmm.
where I'm at now, and I've got a lot of work to do. But that's what joy is to me, is uh, accepting Jesus into my heart and Him filling me with peace and humility, and I can go on and on about um, what He's done for my heart.
So, man, on those days when you say you still have days when you struggle,
Oh, yeah.
um, what are some things that you've found in the days that you struggle that you put in place to be able to remind you to go back to uh, that new place that you've got in your life?
Um, the abundance of blessings that I've overlooked throughout my life.
Mm,
Even to this day, I think sometimes we get so caught up in the silly stuff, and we complain, and we're ungrateful. But when you stop and take a look back at at some of those times in your life that you see that you were truly blessed, and yet you still are truly blessed, that shuts me up pretty quick about whatever hard time I may be going through, that where the enemy's trying to say some stuff in my ear and get me to react a certain way. I
mm,
just I just remember how blessed I am, and so it doesn't work all the time. We're only human, right? But
mm.
that's what I go back to, is I just try to remember how truly blessed I am. You know, in so many ways, and it allows me to forget about whatever I may be complaining about at the time.
So, with that said, I'll ask you here right now, what are you grateful for as we sit here today?
Oh man, I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be given another chance, and to be loved by our Father. Um, a lot of times we may feel like, where is He? I know I used to shake my fist and cuss Him out at times and say, where are you? But He's there the whole time. He doesn't he doesn't turn His back on us. It's us who turn our backs on Him, and I've done that before. So I'm grateful that He still accepts me even after I've cussed Him so many times.
Oh
And
man,
after the after all the things that I've done, He's still there. So that's pretty awesome. I'm grateful for that.
and wouldn't that be such a great thing if we as humans could always practice that too? Because I think you said a key thing there in acceptance, right? And I believe that each and every one of us, we want three things out of our life, and that's to be seen, to be heard, and to feel valued. And I think ultimately, if you boiled all that down into one thing, what we truly want is to feel accepted for who we are, no matter where we come from, no matter what we have experienced in life. We just want somebody to say, hey, it's okay to be you. The world needs you to be
Oh
you.
yeah, yes, exactly. Um, yeah, like you're saying, you want to be, yeah, right there. What you said. The world needs you to be you. I think about, you know, one in, I think we should all overcome our fears of failure or what other people may think, and just be yourself. Um, you know, Sometimes we work so hard on playing different roles, like being the best husband, being the best father, being the best friend, being the best coworker, and we play all these roles. When you come home and you want to be a husband, you do these certain things. When you want to be a good father, you do it this way. When you go to work, we're playing too many roles, and if we just focus on being the best individual we can be, that's all that matters. And overcoming those fears and that failure of not being good enough or whatever, just to be you, you do deserve to be seen and heard. Um, I, I I listen to like motivational speeches and stuff, and I heard this guy say, like, "Where's the richest place on earth?" And
The
the guy
graveyard.
exactly he said because there's so many things that so many books that never got published, so many songs that never got produced because those people couldn't get over that fear of just doing it. And you know, um, I don't know if this is tying in at all to what we're saying, but it's just be you and go do what you want to do. Do what makes you happy. Don't worry about what other people got to say, and get over that fear of doing it. First off, just do it. Don't take that with you. Don't take
Mm.
it with you because you do need to be seen. You do need to be heard, and the world deserves to see what your spiritual gifts are and what your talents are. We've all been blessed with spiritual gifts. We just need to figure out what it is and make good use of it while we're here.
Man, so thinking on that, thinking of you be you, what do you, Robert, get to step into so you are more of yourself?
Music, man. I like music. I don't sing, but I like to write, and that's something here lately. I used to write when I was, real young, back in those days. A lot of explicit content, so I've done away with that. But I couldn't write for a whole year. The first year I was here in South Carolina, but then after about a year, um, after a year of this walk with Christ and this journey that I was going on, and this changing of heart and attitude and outlook, I started writing again. And this time it was no explicit content, completely different stories that I'm telling, Jesus music, I guess you could say. But that's something I would like to do, something I don't want to take to the grave with me. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? As doing my music and not, I just don't want to have that regret of never having done it. I've done a little bit of music before, nothing major, but I'm starting to step into that a little bit more here uh, of recent, and it feels good. It feels good.
Well, that's going to be amazing to see come to life for sure. So we've got a little bit of time left. So
Okay.
I've got two questions. And first is there anything that we haven't touched on that you would want to touch on before we leave the audience here today?
Mm, well, I'll throw this scripture in real quick because I had this when I was talking about just do what you want to do. Jeremiah chapter 1, 4-8. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Jeremiah said, at last, sovereign Lord, I do not know how to speak. I am too young. The Lord said, do not say I am too young. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you and will rescue you, says the Lord. So even though the Lord acknowledged that maybe Jeremiah was too young, and he says, I do not know how to speak. He said, don't say that though. Just go and do it. So in other words, once again, do not make those excuses. Don't tell yourself that you're too young and you can't do it.
Yeah.
Speak those blessings into existence. Bring to life that confidence that you so want in order to do these things. So, and I'm, it's easier said than done because I deal with it too. But I've got to convince myself and think positive and bring these blessings into existence, speak it into existence, man. So touching on that, Jeremiah, the Lord said, "Don't worry about it. I'm with you. I got you. Just go and do it."
Yeah, it's so powerful just the fact that how many of us are walking around saying
Mhm.
we're too of whatever our thing is, whatever our excuse is, too young, too old, too fat, too skinny, uh, not smart enough. Like I think that's so powerful. Thanks for sharing that. That's a great reminder that again, I think it goes back to the faith and we've got to have faith that he's got our back.
Yes, sir.
And then, is there any way that if somebody's listening to this and they want to connect with you, how can they connect with you?
I'm not the most tech savvy and don't have a lot of social media, but I do have a Facebook under Robert Medina, Medina. I'm sure there's a ton of Robert Medinas, but I'm here in Charleston.
And we'll drop it in there so they get to the right one. Absolutely.
Yeah,
yeah, you've got so much wisdom to share with people. I know people are going to listen and they're like, how do I contact this guy, because he shared some of my story. I related so much. And then the final question here is, when you think about No Label Defines Me, what does that mean to you?
Man, it just goes back to my past doesn't define me. I think my label would be my past. I still think about that whenever I see that no label defines me. I think my past does not define me. Who I was at one point in my life, that's not who I am. That's not who I want to be. That's not who I'm going to be. I'm going to completely turn that around. I've been doing it, and yeah, man, just to let other people know, hopefully it's a bit of an inspiration. I know there's tons of guys that have inspired me as well that, were in the same situations as I was, and I look at them now, I'm like, wow. And probably 90% of them have given their life to Christ, and so I think that's the big thing right there. You just allow, let the Lord take over, walk with him and believe in him, and he'll give you a peace that you've never felt before. It's amazing.
Man, Robert, thanks so much for joining us. This is powerful. My friends, make sure and share this out. People need to hear this message. They need to know that their past does not define them. For all the men out there, make sure and go back and listen to that part where we talked about manning up and what it means. You have emotions. You can share your emotions. It doesn't make you weak. You can talk about your problems. And you just have to find that person that you feel safe sharing that with. Oh, man, there was so much here. Thanks so much for being open, being vulnerable, and sharing your story. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of No Label Live. If you enjoyed it, make sure and share it with a friend and tag me. Let me know your thoughts on the episode. Connect with me on YouTube and Instagram at _Nathan_Todd. And make sure and let a friend know that they are more than their label. They matter, and they are one step away from their success. And remember, my friend, you're up to big things. And when you're up to big things, you must be patient, you must be diligent, and you must never, never quit. And you can catch new episodes of No Label Live here every Friday.